In 2015, a man came home to find mysterious notes appearing all over his apartment. Notes he didn't write. Somebody was breaking in, or so he thought, but what he discovered was so much worse. Our story begins in July of 2015 with a Reddit user named R.Bradbury1920. Now, he lived alone in a small apartment, nothing fancy, just a regular one-bedroom place. You know, Bradbury kept to himself, he went to work, he came home. He was just a normal guy with a normal life until one day he came home from work and found a sticky note on his desk. Now, the note itself wasn't threatening or anything, it was just there. A yellow sticky note with some writing on it, questions about a password or something about his computer. But you know, here's the thing. He didn't write it, and he did not know where it came from. He asked his landlord about it, had maintenance been in his apartment, was there any work that needed to be done? And the landlord said no, nobody had been inside, that, Bradbury was the only one with a key. So we thought, okay, weird, maybe he was mistaken, maybe he had written the note and just forgot. I mean, we all do that sometimes. We forget what we've done, we write a note and then forget about it. But then he found another one, and this note was different. It was stuck near his computer, and it was asking him questions, almost like someone was interrogating him. And again, he had no idea where it came from. And he knew that he definitely didn't write this one because he would remember. Over the next few days, more notes started appearing. They'd show up when he was at work in different places around his apartment, his bedroom, his kitchen, stuck to his computer monitor, and they were all asking strange questions or making weird statements that he just didn't understand. But there was one thing the Reddit user knew at this point. Somebody was getting in his apartment, and whoever it was, they were leaving him messages. So our Bradbury does what any person would do. He starts investigating everything. He checks his locks, everything looks fine. There's no scratches, no signs of entry. The deadbolts work perfectly fine. He checked all of his windows, they were locked, nothing seemed disturbed, like somebody had tried to push them up. But the notes kept appearing, and at this point, he's frustrated. He goes, he checks his mail, and he sees a note from his landlord for this month's rent. And kind of confused, he has one of those aha moments. He takes the sticky notes and he puts it next to the note from his landlord, and he notices that the handwriting is very, very close. And at this point, he thinks that it is his landlord, that he was lying before, and that his landlord's just doing this to mess with him because he was late on the rent, or because he just didn't like him, or something that was going on, but he was sure it was his landlord. So he goes back to his landlord, and he's mad this time, and he says, "Are you sure nobody has a key? Are you sure maintenance hasn't been in there? And are you sure it's not you? Because this handwriting looks just like the ones on the notes." And now at this point, the landlord gets defensive, and he says, "I told you nobody's been in your apartment. You're the only one with access." So Bradbury starts asking the neighbors, "Have you seen anyone suspicious? Anyone hanging around the door, going in the apartment?" Nothing. Nobody's seen anything unusual. But yet every day when he comes home from work, there's a new note, sometimes two, and sometimes they're in places he's already checked, like whoever's doing this knows he's looking for him, like they're taunting him. So he starts noticing other things too, small little things like objects weren't quite where he left them, a cup moved from one side of his counter to the other, his laptop would be open when he had sure he had closed it, papers shuffled around his desk. And at this point, Bradbury says, somebody's not just leaving notes, they're going through my things, they're touching his belongings, and the worst part is they're doing it in the day when he's at work. It's like they know his schedule, they're watching him. And at this point, he starts to feel paranoid. He can't focus at work because he's constantly wondering what he's going to find next time he comes home. He's exhausted, he's not sleeping well, he's getting headaches, and just the stress of knowing somebody is invading his personal space is eating at him. So now it's July, and Bradbury decides he needs help, legal help. So, he goes to Reddit and posts specifically to r/legal advice with a straightforward question. My landlord or neighbors are entering my apartment while I'm not there. Now, in this post, he explains everything. The notes, the moved objects, the fact that his landlord denies anyone else has the keys, and he wants to know his options. Can he break his lease? Can he install cameras without permission? He just wants to know what his rights are here. And the post absolutely explodes. People start commenting immediately, saying things like install cameras like yesterday, change your locks because you're allowed to do that in most places, file a police report because this is serious, this is stalking, and this is breaking and entering. Some people suggested, hey, it's probably the landlord and he's lying, while other people say that it could be a tenant who kept a copy of the key, and some even suggest it might be a neighbor who somehow got access. The theories kept coming, but they all agree on one thing. Somebody is definitely breaking into this man's apartment, and he needs to document everything. So Bradbury immediately goes, buys a camera, hooks it into his computer, presses record, and lets the camera run. And he's thinking this time he's going to go to sleep, or he's going to be at work, and he's going to come home, look at the camera, and he's going to see exactly who has been doing this. But there was only one problem. When Bradbury got home from work that day, he went to go check his computer, and he noticed that all of the footage that he had recorded had been erased. So now this person not only is breaking and entering, leaving notes, but they knew that he had a camera. They knew that he had placed that camera there to figure out who they were, and he had disconnected it and wiped everything. So he goes back to Reddit, responding to more comments, giving more details, because at this point, he's just panicking. And he starts giving even more details. And there's one thing he mentioned in there that really stood out to Redditors. He said that his apartment in his bedroom had absolutely no windows. So there was one Reddit user that picked up on this when reading through everything that Bradbury had posted, all of the details, the notes appearing while I was at work, the brain fog, the headaches, the poor ventilation, the small apartment with no windows in the bedroom. And so this Reddit user asks, do you have a carbon monoxide detector in your apartment? Bradbury responds, no, he doesn't have one, but he's starting to wonder what that has to do with somebody breaking in and leaving notes. And other users at this time start asking Bradbury more questions. Does the apartment have any gas appliances? What kind of heating system? When was the last time anything in the apartment was serviced? And then someone asked the critical question that should have been asked all along. Have you compared the handwriting on these notes to your own handwriting? So Bradbury goes quiet for a bit, doesn't respond to anything for a couple hours, and then out of nowhere, he says he just looked at the notes again, like really looked at them. And now that somebody's mentioned it, the handwriting looks really familiar, and it does kind of look exactly like his own handwriting. But that's impossible, right? Because he didn't write these notes. He would remember writing them, wouldn't he? And this is where the case really shifts. People in the comments aren't talking about the break-in anymore. They're talking about carbon monoxide poisoning. They're explaining what it does, how it causes memory loss, confusion, how it can make you do things, write things, move things, have entire conversations and have absolutely no memory of it afterwards. How the symptoms match exactly everything this guy has been describing perfectly. The headaches, the exhaustion, the brain fog, the trouble concentrating, all are symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning. And here is the most terrifying part at all. Bradbury had been coming home every day to an apartment that was slowly poisoning him, getting sicker and sicker, and in his confused state, he had been writing himself notes and moving his own things around. But the carbon monoxide is preventing his brain from forming any memories of it. So the next day, he would come home and find evidence of things with no memory of doing them. So finally, the Reddit user takes the advice, he leaves his apartment, and he buys a carbon monoxide detector. When he goes back to test his apartment, the detector goes off immediately. The carbon monoxide levels are dangerously high enough to kill him if he had stayed there much longer. So he contacts his landlord in a panic. There's something wrong with the building. Something's leaking carbon monoxide into the apartment. Turns out there was a serious problem with the heating system in the building, a problem that had been filling Bradbury's small, poorly ventilated apartment with carbon monoxide day after day, week after week. And because the symptoms developed gradually, he didn't even realize what was happening. He just thought he was stressed, tired, not sleeping well, and he was just full-blown anxiety mode from thinking somebody was breaking into his apartment. But his brain was literally being starved of oxygen. And in that confused, poisonous state, he was the one breaking into his own apartment in a sense. He was writing the notes, moving the objects, but the carbon monoxide was destroying his ability to form any memories about what had happened. So every day, he'd go to work, the levels at his apartment would drop slightly, he'd come home feeling a bit cleaner, and then he'd find the evidence of the things he had done the day before with absolutely no memory of doing them. It was like his brain was trying to communicate something, trying to tell him something was wrong, but the very thing that was wrong was preventing him from understanding his own warnings. I mean, just think about how terrifying that is. You're trying to solve a mystery, and you yourself are the mystery. You're looking for an intruder, and you are that intruder, and you have no idea. Bradbury updated the Reddit thread to confirm what had happened, and he thanked everyone who commented, because that one comment, the one question about carbon monoxide, saved his life. If he would have kept living in that apartment and kept breathing in those fumes day after day, he very likely would have died. Maybe in his sleep. Maybe he would have just never woken up one morning. The story went viral, news outlets picked up on it, and it's become one of the most famous Reddit posts of all time. A reminder that sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones about ghosts and goblins. The scariest stories are the ones where you're your own worst enemy without even knowing it. Bradbury got medical treatment, the landlord fixed the heating system, and he installed multiple carbon monoxide detectors throughout his entire apartment, and he lived to tell the tale because a stranger on the internet made a connection that nobody else had. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, turn on notifications, comment down below what you want me to talk about next.